Hello, and welcome to part 3. Here we are in the copper bathhouse that I showcased in part 2. And I'm dressed as a plumber because we're going to be exploring the sewers today. And we're going to be checking out the sewers. And this is like part of a series of parts where we're going to head deeper and deeper underground and see more and more steampunky themed stuff. As you can see here, I painted the copper brick yellow and lime green and stuff and added lots and lots of copper wallpaper because it's very fitting for this particular theme. And before we head too far deeper into it, I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between realism and sort of representation, abstract representation. So what a lot of skilled builders in Terraria do is they have a particular build in mind, and then they will select materials that look a certain way to help that build. And what they do is they use the materials and they manipulate them, they paint them or they actuate them in such a way where they look a certain way to the eyes of the audience. However, they ignore or get away from the supposed intended realistic use of the material. And a great example of that is this sort of pipe right here. This is Dynasty wood painted green, but of course it's not actually made out of Dynasty wood. The material that's being represented isn't literally made out of the material that's being used. And that's sort of what representation is. It's what I call representation. What I like to do most of the time is do realism, which is the material represented is supposed to be the material being used. So, you know, if I'm using copper brick, it's because this is a room that's made out of copper brick. And if I'm using sandstone brick, it's because that's something that's literally made out of sandstone brick. The thing being represented is the thing being used. And that was part of sort of the whole point of this world, was to use every material in a, you know, in a most realistic way that made sense for that material. This Dynasty wood piping is one of the few examples where I get away from that. And I'm not trying to say that this is better or anything. I'm just saying the whole point of this project was specifically to use materials in their intended realistic way, not to use them just to represent something else in a pixel arty way. So kind of like when most builders, they might envision some sort of thing that they want to build, and then they think of which materials can they use to make that build look really good to our eyes. I did the opposite. I looked at the materials and I'm like, okay, what can I use these materials for that makes sense for those materials and looks reasonably well for our eyes? And the sewer came as a result of me contemplating the fact that, you know, this was around the time when I realized that there's lots of different kinds of brick in the world. There's tin brick, copper brick, tungsten brick. And as you can see, there's lots and lots of tungsten brick here. And the sewer, you know, as a whole actually emerged immediately from me thinking that I needed to do something with tungsten brick. And it had a fairly sort of green and decaying kind of look. So it made sense to this. It also looks like some kind of sprite from Mega Man that you can imagine as being part of a sewer system or something like that. As you can see, I have alchemy lanterns hanging throughout this thing. They're suspended from chains with a bone block that's hammered in so it doesn't seem visible. Of course, you have various, like, background decorations. You have pressed in bricks, you have Dynasty wood pipes, you have copper wallpaper, you have all kinds of paint, you have deep green, deep teal, deep cyan. That's cyan wallpaper right there. You have flower wall and grass wall and all that stuff growing around. And of course you have the main pipes themselves, which are green brick. And I actually got part of this design from other Terraria builders that I looked at. And it's a pretty intuitive design. You just paint the inside with shadow paint and leave some waterfall background and just paint that green, and then you get this effect. And it looks pretty good. Now, you'll notice that there's lots of passages that go up, like, and down from the pipes. These are actually used. They're not just waterfalls for decoration. There is actually water that can flow down from those pipes. And as you can see, the sewer's pretty big. It covers basically the entire underground of the Coran Plateau. The entire underground, it goes from one end to the other. We're going to actually explore it from one end to the other. This right here is the main chamber. We are right below the tree, where the sort of the halfway point along the main compound that I showed in part 2. And here you have a giant pipe and lots of sewage flowing out of it. This right here, if you recall, is the honeyfall pipe that goes all the way up to the honeycomb in the party tree. So we're actually just going to follow it right here. Here it goes, and it goes all the way up into the tree over there. And of course I have just pressed in things so you could see the honey flowing back there. So I'm going to turn the lights on right here. Sewer is one of the few areas where the lights actually turn on. And what I have here are pumps. So I'm going to turn on these pumps. So a few of these pipes are just used to have fountains that make the water green and sewery and let water flow down. These pump pipes, however, actually pull water up from below and let it pour down. And we're going to check out where they actually pour. So this is one of the many ways, one of the several ways I have for making infinite water. It's just a whole, the pipe trick. You have inlet pumps down here, outlet pumps up there, and they just pump it through the sewer. And it makes an interesting effect because you see water sort of pouring down, and you actually have to walk through it. So that's that effect. So what you have down here overall is a cistern. This is supposed to be a chamber that is specifically used for storing water. As you see, it has pipes here and stuff. I'm actually imagining that these outlet pumps up there are sort of like, they pull water out of some sort of filtration system. And that's where these pipes come from, these background pipes. They pull water out of like a filtration system, and they put it down here. Of course, it wouldn't make sense for the cistern to be below the sewer and store water that comes down from the sewer, because cistern water is supposed to be intended for use. Well, I guess that's sort of a design flaw. There's like 5 pumps down here. I could pull water to multiple locations from there, but the 2 pumps I just turned on pull water from down here. And, yeah, but of course, other than that design flaw, the idea is, overall, that this cistern literally contains water that has been purified, taken from, water that's been used by people in the castle and stuff, and then filtered and then sent down here for storage, where it gets, and it's stored down here until it's pulled up to another cleaning system that pushes the water to use. So, water treatment goes through, like, several processes. There's, like, wastewater treatment. Oh, I actually should turn off these pumps before they flood this entire area. They work super fast. So there's wastewater treatment, wastewater collection, and then water treatment. And what's happening here is this is actually, like, the wastewater has been treated, and then it's stored in the cistern. And down here we have another passage. Actually, you could see the roots of the tree in the background here. This is actually the tree right there, this brown stuff, and it goes down all the way there. You can still see it, part of its roots growing into the background, but the idea is that it goes out into the depth, so you don't see the rest of it. Now, what's down there below is that's a lower area. That's part of another video. So we're gonna move on further into this area now. Again, most of the stuff down below should pretty much be ignored. This is another giant sewer pipe, and that one down here below us, the sewer is sort of deteriorating and falling apart, and it's not really functional down there. But it does, the idea is it sort of extends a few layers deep, and that pipe doesn't even work. As you see, it's like crumbling. So the sewer is, of course, part of an ancient sewer that the Corans themselves used for the palaces that they had sitting on the plateau. And we repurposed it. All of the pipes, all of the Dynasty Wood pipes are things that we added, the new civilization added. The Corans had the main stone pipes from before. All of these stone pipes are things that the Corans added themselves. We did nothing to that. I'm going to put up another torch right there so you could see. And we're actually right below the main area right here. This is the bridge this is the eastern bridge that crosses into the main castle. So we're right below it. This actually used to be a mining tunnel. You know, back then mining equipment was stored over here, and miners would go down past the sewer and dig in the surrounding areas before we set up a sort of a mining outpost in the catacombs. So before we go on, I'm going to go into another section right here that's slightly above the sewer that I showed off partially in part 1. And this is the water treatment system, aka the Cistern control room. So what you have here is you have 3 more pairs of inlet and outlet pumps. So there's 5 pumps in total. There's the 2 on the other side that I showed you, and there's 3 over here. And in here we have the Cistern control. And the lights actually turn on. I'm going to turn on all the lights. I could turn on just the ceiling lamps, or just those lights, or I could turn off. There we go. I'm going to turn on the lights. So basically, this leads to the Nexus. We're not going to go there yet. The idea is that you can control all the pumps from this remote location. This actually pretty complicated wiring. I guess it's not that complicated. This was before they added the wiring update. So pumps 1 and 2 are the ones over here on the left. Pumps 3 to 5 are over here. And of course we have a left pumps wire and a right pumps wire. And there's no all pumps wire. And the idea is that they're on 5-second timers. So what happens here is they all run and fill the section up with water. Now, this room here is supposed to be sort of whoever is taking care of the sewer would live down here, and basically where their home gets to be. There's multiple ways of activating the pump. This is like the manual activation up there. Down here you can activate them remotely, and you can reactivate all of them at once with this one lever right there. And as you can see, there's lots of pipery in like the walls that you could see here down below. It's concealed, we can't really get there. And another thing here is that, so you notice that there's actually there's lead pipes, sorry, lead fence right there in this section. This is supposed to be clean water. This is water that's taken from the cistern and cleaned and filtered, and the idea is the inlet pumps down here actually carry it up into the various toilets and the sinks and all that stuff that's up in the castle and the other chambers to actually be used. So this is supposed to be clean water. You can enter the sort of the tank, but you're not really supposed to. But yeah, this is supposed to be totally clean water. You know, you could design a water system pretty easily in Terraria. All you have to do is, and remember sort of 3 steps. There's, you know, wastewater being collected, wastewater being treated, treated wastewater getting stored, the stored water being treated again, and then distributed for personal use. So in my case, the cistern is where all the water is stored. This is where it's treated. These pipes here go up to where it's used, and then there's like 2 pipes here. One of them comes down over here and goes over to the left pumps, which represent the treatment part, the wastewater treatment part. So that'd be the wastewater treatment, wastewater storage. This is the water treatment. So that's that. And there's also a neat little mechanic here I added where I can actually close the doors to this pump room, and I can open up the valves, which allows all the water to flood out into the sewer. And then I close the valves, and then that stops happening. I'm going to open the doors. And there you go. And that just floods everything down below. Oh wow, I actually flooded all the water here. I'm going to have to repair that later on. But yeah, that's the basic idea here. So that's the cistern. Useful for making water. Very easy to make water. Tons of water. Granted, with an bottomless water bucket. Doesn't really matter, but still. It's also right below the storage area, right here. And now we're going to go over here. Now notice, we are right below the moat of the main castle, right there. This is where it is. This is sort of the river right below it. Oh, one more thing. I forgot to mention. You noticed the fact that this cistern has windows, so the water actually flows above these windows. This is lead fence, and you could actually, we're still above the underground level, so you could actually see daylight over there when it's daytime. That's actually appropriate. The idea is this cistern is down below it's in a canyon. So what it's looking out over is a canyon. Sort of the northern end of the plateau has a canyon, and this cistern is sitting right there. So the floor of the canyon is actually below the level of these windows on sort of behind the wall here. And the idea is that there's water down there as well at the floor of the canyon. And what happens here is that this river right here, that obviously flows from like north to south, sort of somewhere on the northern end, there's like a waterfall and a huge drop where it falls down into the canyon, and the water bed, sort of the top of the river in the canyon is actually lower than these windows, which is why they're above ground. So that's sort of like the topography of this entire area explained in a bit more detail. Now this northern-southern running river, it's actually pretty deep. It goes far underground, and I have some switches set up here where you can actually deactuate these tin plating blocks and let all the water pour out. I don't know why you would, but they're there just because I feel like it's appropriate that they be there. This is supposed to be like another sewer pipe. Presumably that river didn't exist earlier, or somehow it was a lot shallower, or for whatever reason the river came into existence. Here's another pipe. So this is sort of the eastern edge of the sewer. As you can see, it's also crumbling down below and stuff like that, and there's things are falling apart, and now all of these pipes are just totally blocked off because there's an enormous amount of water on the other end. And to end things off, we're going to go over to this pipe that takes us into a fascinating area. And this is sort of the eastern edge of the sewer system right here, and it flows. There's some arapaima spawning because there's a jungle biome. And this is an underground mushroom biome, as you can see. It's very blue. It's very interesting. I built a little house here. Unfortunately, I can't get the truffle to move in, but that is that. There's also a sort of a factory back here that I'm not gonna get too far into that, but we're gonna revisit this area again in further detail. The idea, though, is just a lot of the extra water would pour out of this pipe, and it sat here, and a lot of mushrooms ended up growing and taking over this whole area, as you can see. And yeah, that is basically it for the sewer. This has been part 3, and I hope you enjoyed this tour of the sewer, and hopefully I will see you in part 4, where we're going to go deeper and explore the catacombs and the lower facilities that you can actually see a bit right here. But that is it for now. Farewell.